Argentina's journey stands as a global warning, a reflection of what happens when political agendas override disciplined economic thinking. A country that once ranked among the world's wealthiest has spent over a century sinking into repeated crises, defaults, and chaos. Its long decline shows how a nation can be undone, not by misfortune, but by the mismanagement of its own prosperity. In 1913, Argentina ranked among the top 10 richest countries on the planet, with a standard of living that matched France and Germany. Its ports were packed with shipments of beef, wheat, and wool bound for Europe's industrial centers. Buenos Aires earned the nickname Paris of South America, overflowing with opera houses, boulevards, and electric streets. The peso was backed by gold, railways funded by British investors stretched across the pampas, and confidence seemed boundless. But this golden age proved fragile. When the Great Depression struck in 1929, Argentina's dependence on exports turned from blessing to curse. As global demand evaporated, the economy collapsed. Foreign capital disappeared, unemployment soared, and in 1930 the military overthrew the government. That moment marked the beginning of a long era defined by political turbulence, makeshift policies, and a slow drift away from long-term planning. The 1940s introduced the political figure who would reshape Argentina's identity for the rest of the century, Juan Domingo. He promised social justice, worker dignity, and national pride, and for a time, it looked as though he had revived the economy. Wages increased, factories expanded, and optimism returned. Yet it was a prosperity built on an unsustainable formula, spending far more than the nation could realistically generate. Perón nationalized key industries, expanded subsidies, and used the printing press as a political instrument. Growth depended less on productivity than on charisma and redistribution. When funds ran low, he borrowed further. This hybrid ideology, part nationalism, part populism, part personal cult, became the dominant political framework for decades. It was not just a philosophy, it became a dependency, teaching future governments to maintain support by borrowing against tomorrow. Over time, inflation became an everyday reality. Prices rose faster than paychecks, leading citizens to stash US dollars in cupboards, closets, and mattresses. This created a shadow economy, the now famous blue dollar market. Every new administration vowed to tame inflation, but instead repackaged the same cycle of subsidies, price controls, and fresh debt. By the 1970s, political instability had turned violent, with military dictatorships replacing elected governments and generals replacing economists. Each new regime borrowed enormous sums from abroad, insisting that the next surge of growth would justify it. But loans built very little productive capacity, they built illusions. Between 1976 and 1983, during the dictatorship, Argentina's external debt jumped from $8 billion to $45 billion. Inflation consumed savings, and corruption flourished. The breaking point arrived in 1982, when Latin America fell into a continent-wide debt crisis and Argentina defaulted, triggering its first major modern collapse. The International Monetary Fund intervened with loans and conditions, initiating a prolonged and uneasy partnership between Argentina and global financial institutions. By the late 1980s, the currency was a national joke. Hyperinflation hit an astounding 3,000% annually, with prices doubling week after week. In 1991, Argentina attempted a bold reset, the convertibility plan, which pegged the peso directly to the US dollar. Inflation disappeared overnight, foreign money flowed in, and optimism reawakened. But fixed exchange rates offer stability wrapped around a trap. Imports surged, exports weakened, and the economy relied on a constant supply of foreign dollars. Unable to print United States currency, Argentina borrowed it, constructing yet another facade of prosperity. When global conditions shifted, the model imploded. In 2001, Argentina defaulted on $132 billion in sovereign debt, the largest default in history at the time. Withdrawals were frozen, millions lost their savings, and poverty rates doubled. The collapse marked the end of a century-long dream of sustained prosperity. Even that disaster was not final. Within a few years, a recovery began, buoyed by soaring commodity prices and a new wave of political enthusiasm. Yet by 2014, the cycle had repeated itself. Another default, another negotiation, another IMF arrangement. By 2020, nearly 20 years of partial recoveries had evaporated, and Argentina was again restructuring tens of billions in debt. In today's Argentina, money functions in two parallel worlds. The official peso exists in banks, proclaimed by the government, printed endlessly, and worth whatever officials insist it is. The blue dollar is the real currency, the street rate shaped by fear, distrust, and demand for stability. Inflation is no longer an event. It is a permanent condition. By 2024, it exceeded 140%, and the pace of price changes only accelerated. Rent contracts are pegged $2, salaries shrink before workers can spend them, and daily life resembles constant improvisation. The formal financial system exists mostly on paper. The real economy runs on survival instincts. A vast underground network of cuevas and formal dollar exchanges, hidden behind shops and offices, keeps the system functioning. Everyone knows about them, including authorities. It's simply how the country operates now. In October 2025, the United States under President Trump unveiled a $40 billion bailout for Argentina. Half of it came through a treasury swap line, the rest through private financing. Officially, the purpose was to stabilize the currency, prevent another default, and support President Javier Milei's pro-market reforms. Unofficially, it was about geopolitics, keeping Argentina aligned with Washington rather than Beijing. On the surface, it looks like a rescue. In reality, it resembles a familiar script. The US is doing what the IMF did, repeatedly lending money to a country whose core issue isn't a lack of funds, but a lack of credibility. The bailout quickly became politically divisive. American farmers questioned why taxpayers should support a competitor that exports soy and beef. Economists warned of moral hazard, arguing that rewarding a nation with a long record of default sets a dangerous precedent. But global power doesn't operate on simple logic. Nations buy influence the same way they buy goods. With China increasingly financing ports, infrastructure, and influence across Latin America, a $40 billion credit line from Washington is a strategic message. You're still in our sphere. For Argentina, it's another chapter in an old story. Politicians promise reform. The peso stabilizes briefly. Headlines tout improvement, and everyday life remains unchanged. The blue dollar keeps climbing. Supermarkets shift quietly to US pricing. Small businesses shut their doors. Young professionals leave the country. The brain drain worsens. The cultural cycle continues. Argentina is not a South American outlier. It is the early warning sign of a global pattern. Governments printing money to maintain popularity, borrowing endlessly to maintain programs, and spending recklessly to maintain power. When debt becomes identity, decline becomes inevitable. The difference between nations is timing, not destiny. The fundamental lesson is that inflation is not merely a statistic, it is evidence that a society no longer trusts its own currency. Once confidence erodes, people stop planning for the future. The middle-class phrase. The young stop thinking long-term. The elderly stop saving. Inflation destroys the connection between effort and reward long before it destroys the economy itself. Argentina isn't doomed, it is simply the outcome of decades of political maneuvering that relied on dysfunction instead of fixing the system. The tragedy is not repeated default. The tragedy is the repeated waste of potential. The 2025 bailout won't solve the underlying problem. It may delay another breakdown, but it cannot repair a financial culture built on denial. That is what makes Argentina so unsettling. It isn't an exotic failure, it is a preview of where any country might end up if it treats money as a political tool instead of an economic measure. History may not repeat itself, but it always charges interest. And once again, Argentina is paying the price. The nation's decline stands as a warning to the world, a stark reminder of what happens when political ambition overwhelms economic reality. It shows how quickly prosperity can vanish when mismanaged, and how difficult it is to rebuild once trust is lost.